First of all, Bwana Senator, I think the first question that many would ask is, could this have been avoided?
Yes, it's obvious.
Yes.
It could have been avoided because before a school is fully licensed to operate, there are around 22 steps that has to take place. We have got also a whole department in the Ministry of Education for quality assurance with funding. That what have they been doing? If we go to that school and check right from the visitor's book, when was it last inspected in terms of structural, in terms of the capacity of the pupils, enrollment, the teaching and so forth. So it should have been avoided.
Yes. Amos, I think the first point of argument for many, and especially the political leaders who come from within that region, was the fact that there is no public primary school within that ward, or at least around the area, the Ngando area where this tragedy happened. And therefore, most of the families, they are forced to take their kids to this school that we are talking about, Precious Talent Top School. About 800 kids there, and you did see what it looks like, the compound there. Why are we not having enough schools provided by government, public schools, easily accessible for many?
Thank you, and condolences to their families that have lost their children. I dropped my daughter in school yesterday, and the worst that a parent will expect is to pick a corpse from the school. So it's very unfortunate. However, I think I want to argue that the challenge of schools is complex and deeper than we really want to rush it to become. The case of Nairobi is even murkier because of the issue of the land tenure system in this city, the cost of land. And you look at the areas that are highly affected, which are informal settlements. And that is where 70% of children who are school-going age live. So it's very complex. If you have to set up a school, how many people must you relocate, for instance, to set up a public school, and all that is involved. So it's not just a problem that is affecting Ngando area alone. It's affecting all these slum areas. You're talking about Korogocho, Mukuru, and such. So it's a deeper and complex issue. Even where we already have public schools existing, because this city has 200 public schools only. And the last school to be set up was around 1997. So for a span of over 20 years, we've never developed any other school. Now, secondly, the schools, the 200 schools are inequitably distributed. So you go to areas where there are schools within the same radius of, you go to Westlands and you have Westlands Primary, next to it you have Bora, then you have Muguga Green, within just a radius of 300 meters. But right across the road, there's no single school. And yet we know children cannot cross roads to go to a school. So the issues are complex. You go to the area around State House, you have Nairobi Primary, you have State House Primary, you have St. George's Primary. Yet you are now talking about areas such as Ngando with no single school. If you look at schools such as Jamhuri, they don't have children. If you look at schools like Joseph Kangede, they don't have enough children. You go to the areas around Isili, and we have what you call the Bamba schools. You have 3 schools separated by the fence. They don't have children. Yet there are areas where there is dire need. So there is a question of extreme shortage, but there are also the question of equitable distribution. And so it speaks to our policy around what we have thought around schools development. It's a deeper issue. It cannot be solved overnight. And these schools that we have seen keep on existing because there is a need. If, for instance, today the government decided to shut down those schools, where will the more than 1 million children go to? Because they have the right to education. So it's a complex issue that cannot just be solved overnight, but requires a very sober conversation. And one of the things that one would do is to invite anyone to look at the report of that the former governor for Nairobi put in place at 2014. That seriously looks at the issue of distribution of schools. And just go to chapter 6. And look at the recommendations of the task force that are very bold. But however, as we have known the history of this country, there's a challenge around implementation. And it's not just because people don't want to implement, but also because of complexities of how to implement. You're talking about very many stakeholders that are involved. If even it's about licensing, you're not getting licenses from one end. You're getting them from different places. So it's the general dysfunctionality of how policy formulation, how policy implementation.
Exactly, and let's talk about that, because this is a line from the Daily Nation. We allowed 800 young lives to be put at outrageous risk to serve one man's greed, with callous and careless authorities looking the other way as he flouted regulations.
I think that's a bit harsh.
It is harsh, but it does capture what we are talking about, because he did mention, Senator, that and you spoke about this earlier, that there should be checks and balances before permits are issued for someone to run an institution. And the fact that there are no public schools around this area cannot allow someone to then set up a ramshackle and then put kids at risk like that.
Exactly.
So really, as Senate, and because you check government and the Ministry of Education in this case, when they appear before you and some of these things are raised, some of these questions are raised, what is the level of responsibility that they take, and what do they do about such things?
Yeah, I've seen the minister saying he takes the responsibility.
Yeah.
But he should take it beyond the verbal talk. So wherever we invite these people, they normally come. Sometimes they are saying they are very busy with the executive. And I want to say that the National Assembly should take serious oversight on the matters national functions. The way we are so hard on as senators, you've seen we have been so hard on the governors to account for anything that is going to the county, anything devolved. The Senate has been doing all this without even finance for the oversight, but we've been really trying. So I want to say that such a thing that has happened like this, it can't happen in civilized nation, and people are left like that. My expectation at this point of time is that people who are signatories to this particular process should have been arrested and prosecuted, so that others may learn lessons in future. Otherwise, as he was telling me when we were just outside there, you will, as time goes by, you will find these criminals. You see, even these particular buildings, the people themselves had experienced tremors for 2 weeks, and they had seen very huge cracks, and they had reported to their teachers, they had reported to their administrators, and to the proprietor of the schools. But nothing happened. Somebody continued holding these particular children, and this is a very risky situation for all this long, and this one happened. We must set structures that will help this country proactively to solve these problems before they come. You know, we are reactive. And as he was saying, in 2 weeks, this story will have been forgotten, people set free, and you might be surprised. The same pupils will be in the same school, nothing will have happened. He has also said that the issue is so deep. If actually this particular private school, which is so risky to these particular students or pupils, is in a place where there is no public school, then it should not be an excuse of land. It should not be an excuse of shortages of what. The government has declared 100% transition. They should have already proactively identified a place in that particular, even if it is a slum, where they can build a school. A school is so important that surpasses any other interest. I would have expected even them to go and request that particular private person to partner up and come up with better structures. Yeah?
Okay.
Otherwise, you see what is happening. It should not be an excuse.
So he says that people should be held to account.
Yes.
But is it a case of lives have to be lost? We have to experience this kind of tragedy for action to be taken? Because for you to build a structure of that kind, of course, there's a construction authority, there's buildings, whatever, all those permits that you have to get, even from the Ministry of Education, to come and inspect that if it is good enough, the quality. And we did see the materials that were used in construction there. Really, why do we allow ourselves to get here?
There are many things, and I want to agree with the Senator. And there is a point which we should not lose, which he just started on, the issue of partnership. But just before that, to argue that safety is not embedded in us as Kenyans. That's why when we hear of a scream, we rush over there. When you hear of a sound and a blast, 90% of Kenyans don't know what to do next. So safety is not embedded in us. You know, unlike in the Israel nation where everyone is trained in a militarized way, in a way to be so cautious around yourself. Chances are very high that if something was to happen, many of us just don't know what to do. So it is not just unique and left to the schools, but it's a societal problem. And that's why when you look at even the kind of response that the citizens were offering on site, it's what even will lead to more casualties. Chances are very high that today, if you are involved in a road accident, the people who will make you die faster are the responders, the emergency responders, because it is not well inbuilt in all of us to know what should I do in the event I have a dislocation, I have a what. So it's first of all a general societal problem which must concern all of us from all angles and the people involved, whether it's from any form of authority, just to ensure that public awareness as far as is highly embedded. Now we come to the whole issue of professional negligence on many of these parts, and that's where it becomes even murkier, because you're dealing with many bodies. Some of them have got duplication in roles, some of them have got no clear standards. Like as we speak now, this country does not have a school infrastructure policy. So you do not know what makes the minimums of infrastructure. And I'm saying this because those of us who are really getting so deep into the world of sustainability and sustainable construction, especially in education, will tell you that looking at the kind of population that we're having, we need to be designing our infrastructure for scale. We need to be designing our infrastructure for sustainability. How sure are you that this infrastructure will hold you for the next 50 years, 100 years? If you just walk into this city, there are two buildings. There's one along Kenyatta Avenue. Actually, two of them along Kenyatta Avenue. One, the Standard Chartered Bank just down here, and the Kipande House. These are buildings which were put up in 1918, and they are intact. Chances are very high that if you look at the kind of construction that we are seeing from Chinese all over in this city, they are breaking down within 3 or 4 years, because we do not have sustainable construction indicators that help us to really be sure that the safety of the people in need, including the air quality. You're talking about the water levels that are supposed to be used in that building. You're talking about the energy levels. And so these things are not embedded in us. So one of the things that I go back to, even when we want also to blame Parliament, I think it's important that we also accept that it is not panacea to all our problems. There are serious capacity challenge. I have a problem with the senator over here, but this one I'll talk with him outside this. In terms of how do we build capacities for county governments to begin managing primary education, because their capacities are extremely low. And I cannot sit here and begin blaming senator, because there are also certain things which you may also not have realized. So the best thing for us to do is to look at where do we build these capacities. But where there's professional negligence, I think we need to swing into action. People have to take responsibility. If there is an engineer who is a cost, because you see, for a layman as me, if for instance I'm the proprietor and you tell me that we have built a building that meets the requirements, I only have my naked eyes. How can I tell with my naked eyes that you didn't put in enough cement, you didn't put in the enough support beams and all that? For a person who is a developer, because every infrastructure project has different players in it. You have got the architect, you have the structural engineer, you have the contractor, you have the developer, then you have these other approvals like NEMA, MCA, and all that. But so it's a very complex media.
On that point that you bring up, and we've seen some of the images from yesterday there, this classroom or this structure was built using wood. Very
Imagine.
Thin wood, iron sheets,
and the chicken wire
mesh, all right, and concrete, and 3 classes I think on the upper floor and another 3 on the lower floor, each carrying about 30 children. Surely from a naked eye you're able to see that this is a risk, whoever is inspecting, Senator,
and even the contractor.
Surely you can see.
You know, the problem here is that we have done 2 things in our country. We have prioritized some things in our country that will never help us. One, we have prioritized so much in everything, that even most of the times you invite people into this particular stage is to come and do politics. How many times do you invite professionals, per se, to do with infrastructure, to do with planning of the country and everything else, to come and highlight on some things that will help our country? So that is one challenge. We have over-politicized everything. Number 2, we have become so much commercial oriented
Yeah.
that we can do business in anything, no matter how risky it is
Anything
to
goes.
human life.
Yeah.
Like
Anything
most of the,
goes.
in fact, I want to appreciate what Matiang'i did. By the way, most of the colleges before Matiang'i, even the universities had established some campuses on top of some buildings,
Bars.
some bars. You could get a school on top of a bar. You could get anything. There are so many things that should help, that guides the ministry in approving a particular structure that the student should live in, the type of buildings and everything else. But I want to tell you, most of these things are done in offices. These private developers goes to the offices and they tell them, I'm developing a school in this particular place, my friend, and they part with money and they continue doing those things. And we are also excuse makers. You'll hear somebody saying there are no enough money, there are no, but can you get to a particular county and go around, do a spot check, and see how many schools quality assurance has visited in a year? For example, we may be having, I want to tell you the truth, we may be having in a county like my county, Bomet, there are say 400 schools. How many days does it require a quality assurance person to visit those schools? If you divide those particular 600 schools, secondary and primary schools, maybe if you divide by in terms of, if he visits 10 schools per day, out of 600,
which
it
is
requires
impossible.
only, it requires 60 days to go. How many has he managed? And these people have got very good cars. I was very happy yesterday. I visited a school in Bomet that the student had planned a dormitory last week. We went to the director of education and the ministry and the director of TSE to that particular school. I was able to check on the visitors book, and I was able to see that they were there last week during that particular time. But before then, no one had visited the school. And I want to say this.
Yes.
It is not hard as we think. It does, everything does not require money. Simply go even to go to the county headquarters and take a perimeter of maybe 3 kilometers, where even somebody can work. Even the schools within town,
Still have a problem.
which an inspector quality assurance person
Yes.
can work in and do some inspection.
Maybe, Senator, you should be aware that the 200 schools in Nairobi
Yes.
have not been visited by quality assurance
Imagine.
officers.
That's the thing.
Let them
that's,
come.
that's
Let
actually
them
what I was
in
coming
fact,
to.
as
So,
the
all right,
Senate chair,
all right. So
I want
let's
to
say-
tell you one
yes.
thing. We want to go and invite these particular people to the Senate Committee Education Senate. We want to take an audit, a serious audit, on how many schools have been visited in this particular city for the last 1 year.
And
You
what were
might
the
be
reports?
surprised. And their reports,
What
the
were the
quality
reports? Because let's not sit here and act like Precious Talent School
Yeah.
is the only school with
It
such
is not the
defects.
only school.
Yeah.
In this city, we are talking
There's
about more than
so
3,000
many
of such.
of them.
3,000 of them in this city.
Yes.
Yeah.
And every
Which are
Kenyan
exactly
will
the
tell
same.
you we don't have money. All these excuses all the time, where every problem, you've got to mention the issue of money. About, we could not do because we've not been facilitated. Everybody wants facilitation. We don't have that particular,
Yes.
that enthusiasm to work, to help people.
Yes.
These are the things that we want to see.
I had mentioned the issue of capacity, and I want to go back to it. I've mentioned the issue of, in this city, you're talking about more than 3,000 these schools, which are actually called complementary schools, because they are not private schools. But you see the lie that is often sold to parents that your child is attending a private school, and yet they don't really meet the requirements for a private school. And this explains why we've had a policy called the Alternative Promotion for Basic Education and Training, AMBET. And this is where most of these institutions go to hide, because they are called complementary schools, because they cannot meet the requirements for a private schools, because private schools are a little bit higher. And the Basic Education Act only recognizes public and private schools. That becomes one of the issues. Now, I want to mention that if you walk into a newly constructed classroom or building in this city without being a professional, there's very little you know as far as sustainability of such a building is concerned. And this explains why even NC are telling us that they have more than 12,000 buildings that are actually earmarked for demolition. And when you talk about demolishing 12,000 buildings, what does it mean? It will equally be, it will be chaotic as well. So why we insist that it's important to have capacities build, especially at the oversight level, at Parliament, and that means both the two houses, the National Assembly as well as Senate, and our county assemblies, their abilities and their capacities to oversight, to be able to ask some of these hard questions. Okay. Because I can assure you that chair here is actually going to Senate, is actually going to summon the CS. Yeah. But I can assure you that the kind of story the CS will give him will be so compelling that in another 1 month, he'll actually be the one defending the CS. So unless we really build those capacities to be in a position really to look at what are these issues specifically that we need to be looking out for, it will become a serious problem. But it must concern all of us. What does it mean in terms of giving all children an affordable but quality education that is just close to them? If you look at the story that your colleague had just been doing in Kwale on the kind of infrastructure, and you look at it and ask yourself, what should we have done? Especially with what you call massification of education reaching as many people as possible. Yes. So it's important that even as we have this conversation, it's not just reactive, so that it's not a 1, 2, 3 days and after that it collapses, but we are so deliberate. And I really look forward to a time when institutions such as Parliament will be able really to help us or get support from those of us who are outside and have a conversation in terms of how do we have a workable model that ensures that all children can get quality education that is actually affordable. Because there is one fallacy that we have sold to the Kenyan players, that quality education is costly, and that explains why Senator is saying that we always talk about I have not been facilitated. But what are these things that even we can do without money? He mentioned an aspect to do with partnership, and it's very critical. The only way we are going to unlock the challenge of schools in this country is when we redefine public and private relationship. Because in this country, it is highly adversarial. They look that they are competitive in nature. When you go to cities such as London, private developers are not allowed to develop schools because they don't have capacity. If you go to an area such as Kilimani, where do you get 400 million to buy 1 acre to start building a school? Yet you see you have a school such as St. George's that has capacity to absorb another 3,000 children. Which, what could have happened? What the citizens around Ngando are asking, why don't we have an opportunity to partner with the Lenana? If government does not have money, these private developers can put in their money. We construct a school. What is the interest of the private developers? Is to get a return on their investment. You can still pay them 10%, 15% without necessarily risking the lives of children as we are doing right now. So all these things are possible, but it requires a sense of leadership. And I hope that Chair is over here. He can take this challenge because he still has another 2-3 years to really come up with a workable model that delivers education in this city. Otherwise, the 24 million children will never get education in this country.
Let's make one thing clear. From what happened yesterday, who holds the blame for that? In a nutshell, Senator. Who should be blamed for what happened yesterday?
In fact, that is a very complicated question, but I want to answer it this way. I want to say that the first blame goes to those who are supposed to do the right thing. Definitely the Ministry of Education. As the CS had said, I take the responsibility. But you see, it's a CS who is there only barely 5 months. Other people who are there, those who appended their signatures in the approval of such a particular building. You're seeing the structural engineers of that time. These are the people that should be followed to account for what they did. If we leave such people,
as well.
Yes, those are the people. The proprietor of that particular school, after seeing that there were cracks everywhere, why did he continue holding children in that particular building? And I want to tell you, even the headmaster himself, I am telling you some of these things can be avoided. Yesterday, while I was coming from home, I was driving myself. I felt that brakes were not right while I was driving. And then I went to a particular garage in Narok. And then in that particular garage, I found a school bus where the bottom of it had been destroyed. And then I was asking the driver, ni wanafunzi walifunja hii gari ama namna gani? Wakaniambia hii gari, because of financial challenges, we failed to take it for service inspection. Imagine, for a period of 5 months, the service elapsed for 5 months. And then when he parked somewhere in school, because there were no brakes, it just rolled down and knocked that tree and stopped. Just imagine such a situation where a whole principal can...
Wow.
And I want to tell you another risk.
Yes.
Can you go to schools? I have attended a school again. We attended was it last time. A school whereby it had also burned down, our dormitory. And then while the students were being suspected that they were the ones who burned the dormitory, later on it was discovered that it was electric voltage that failed. There was no inspection. Somebody else, we recommend that the school be inspected thoroughly in terms of a wiring system. The engineer gave a report that the wiring was so faulty, the rat had chewed some cables, and the school were at the mercies of God. So I want to say that how many times do we send these particular electrical engineers, how many infrastructural engineers to inspect the schools and give a report? And then the greatest challenge is implementation. Those people may be doing good work, but the implementation is a challenge, to the point that if you check most of them, they are so discouraged that these are the recommendations we made at a certain point: destroy this building, destroy this 10 years ago, but nothing happened.
So from where you sit, the Ministry of Education is responsible for what happened yesterday.
Yes, and the proprietor of the school.
Of the school, yes.
I totally agree with the senator. The ministry takes 80%. I mean, it takes about 40%.
40%.
40%. The city hall takes another
They have their own
40%,
portion.
because there is no excuse whatsoever. Because the reason why governments exist is so that citizens can surrender violence to government. It's because citizens have to be protected from themselves. So when a government which is supposed to hold public interest in trust is unable to do it, then I think it becomes a serious challenge. And so the indictment on these two means that even the oversight bodies, such as Parliament and the county assemblies, are equally responsible. Now, before now, we can put this blame lastly on the proprietors and all that, because we know that human nature is callous and evil in nature. So if left, we will sink back to our own private interests at the expense of the public interest. So I think that is important that even in this blame, the ministry takes the strides and carefully asks itself, how can we ensure that children can get an education next door, that is affordable and of quality? Because sometimes you also have these public schools, but the quality is so bad that parents are like, I mean, by the way, look at the trade-offs that parents have to make.
Imagine.
Because sometimes our parents are like, why are you telling me that the school is not structurally sound? I live in a Mabati house. The school is of the same nature. So what is therefore so different? Because this is how the common man will think when they are living in those informal settlements. So I think that is the responsibility of government to ensure that you protect the interests of the public. Because if you don't do that, then you will not have future generations. You can't afford to kill all these children. But I can assure you one thing, Edmond, and the chair is over here. Chair, as you think of education right now, don't think of education from now. In another 12 years, we will have 24 million children in the school. System.
Yes.
What does it mean?
What does it mean?
It means a complete redesign of our public education
system.